The champagne flutes caught the light from the crystal chandelier above, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floor of what everyone believed was my parents' mansion. I adjusted the simple black dress I'd chosen for tonight. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. That was always my strategy. Stay invisible, observe everything, let them show their true colors. "Rebecca, there you are!" Catherine's voice cut through the elegant murmur of conversation like a blade through silk. My younger sister glided toward me in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her perfectly manicured nails wrapped around a wine glass. I was just telling everyone about my promotion at Henderson and Associates. The circle of family, friends, and relatives turned toward us with practiced party smiles. Aunt Margaret, Uncle Robert, my parents' country club acquaintances, all watching with the kind of polite interest that barely masked their judgment. "Congratulations," I said simply, meaning it. Despite everything, I was genuinely proud when Catherine succeeded. I'd always been proud of her. "It's such a relief to have at least one successful daughter," my mother chimed in, appearing at Catherine's elbow like she'd been summoned. "Catherine's salary is simply extraordinary for someone her age." I took a sip of my water, never alcohol at family gatherings, I needed to stay sharp, and watched the familiar dynamic unfold. Catherine basked in the attention while I became part of the wallpaper, exactly as it had been since we were children. "What about you, dear?" Mrs. Henderson from down the street asked with false sweetness. "Are you still waitressing?" The pause before waitressing was surgical in its precision. Not a job, not work, but waitressing, as if the word itself was something distasteful. "I work in the service industry," I replied evenly. Catherine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Rebecca, don't make it sound so mysterious. She works at Miller's Diner downtown. Tips and minimum wage, you know how it is." The circle shifted uncomfortably. Some looked sympathetic, others simply embarrassed for me. But I caught something else in a few faces, a flicker of curiosity about why I seemed so calm, so unruffled by what should have been humiliating. "Well," Aunt Margaret cleared her throat, "everyone starts somewhere. Some people just stay there," Catherine added with a shrug that was meant to look casual but landed like a slap. I set down my water glass carefully on the nearest table, the small crystal sound somehow carrying over the room's conversation. "Would anyone like me to refresh their drinks? I'm used to it, after all." Before anyone could respond, Catherine clapped her hands together. "Oh, that's perfect! Rebecca, you could help with the serving tonight. At least you'd have something useful to do." The suggestion hung in the air for a moment. I could see my parents exchanging glances, not uncomfortable enough to intervene, but aware enough to know this was crossing a line. Still, they said nothing. They never said anything when Catherine pushed boundaries. "I don't think—" Mrs. Henderson started. No, it's brilliant!" Catherine was warming up now, her voice getting brighter and more animated. "Rebecca's practically a professional at this, and honestly, she looks a bit lost just standing around." Several people in the circle laughed. Nervous, uncertain laughter, but laughter nonetheless. The kind that people use when they're not sure if something is funny or cruel, but don't want to be left out. I looked around the room, at the imported Italian marble, the hand-painted ceiling frescoes, the artwork that each piece could fund a small business. Then I looked at my family, at Catherine's expectant face, at my parents' carefully neutral expressions. "Of course," I said quietly. "I'd be happy to help." The relief in the room was palpable. Crisis averted, awkwardness smoothed over, the natural order restored, Rebecca in her proper place. Catherine beamed and handed me her empty wine glass. "You're such a good sport. Could you get me another Chardonnay? The good stuff, not the house wine." As I moved through the party with a small serving tray I'd found in the kitchen, I listened to the conversations flowing around me. Stock portfolios, vacation homes in the Hamptons, children at Ivy League schools, the usual currency of my parents' social circle. "Catherine's doing so well at that law firm," someone was saying. "Such a bright girl, always knew she'd go places." And so beautiful, too. She'll make some lucky man very happy. I refilled wine glasses and collected empty appetizer plates, invisible in the way that service workers always are to the wealthy. It was fascinating, really, how quickly people forgot you existed when you were performing a service for them. Rebecca was always the quiet one. I heard my mother explaining to someone. Very different from Catherine. Catherine has always been our little go-getter. I paused near the kitchen door, balancing a tray of empty glasses, and caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Simple black dress, hair pulled back, no jewelry except my grandmother's watch. I looked exactly like what they saw, a woman in service, unremarkable, forgettable. The irony was exquisite. "Oh, there she is!" Catherine's voice rose above the others. "Rebecca, come here a second." I approached the group that had formed around Catherine near the fireplace. She was holding court now, wine making her gestures more expansive, her voice carrying further than it should. "I was just telling everyone about my new position," Catherine said, her arm sliding around my shoulders in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt proprietary. "Senior associate at Henderson and Associates. Do you know what that means?" "Congratulations," I repeated. "It means I'm making more money at 28 than most people make in their 40s, Catherine continued, her grip on my shoulder tightening. "It means I'm successful." She let that word hang in the air between us, heavy with implication. "Catherine, perhaps," my father started, but she was on a roll now. "You know what the best part is?" Catherine turned to address the room, using me as a prop in her performance. "I get to work with amazing people. Brilliant lawyers, successful business people, real movers and shakers, not like—" She gestured vaguely at me. "Well, you know." The room had gone quiet now, conversation dying as people sensed drama brewing. Some looked uncomfortable, others frankly curious about how far Catherine would push this. "My boss is actually coming tonight," Catherine announced suddenly. "I invited him because I wanted to show off my family, my background. It's important in my industry to come from the right kind of people." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not fear exactly, but anticipation. The kind of feeling you get right before a storm breaks. "He should be here any minute," Catherine continued, checking her watch. "David Thompson, senior partner. He's the one who recommended me for the promotion. Says I have exactly the kind of polish and breeding the firm values." She looked at me pointedly. "He appreciates people who understand their place in the world." The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. My father moved to answer it, and I heard voices in the entryway, polite greetings, the rustle of coat being taken, footsteps approaching. "That must be him!" Catherine's face lit up with excitement. She quickly smoothed her dress and checked her reflection in the window. "Remember, everyone, this is very important for my career." David Thompson entered the room, and I felt the world shift slightly on its axis. Tall, silver-haired, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that screamed expensive tailoring. He carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Catherine!" He approached with arms outstretched, giving her a friendly embrace. "Thank you so much for inviting me. Your home is absolutely stunning." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'm so glad you could make it." Catherine was practically glowing with pride. "I'd love to introduce you to everyone." She began making introductions, and I watched David work the room with practiced ease. Firm handshakes, warm smiles, the kind of small talk that came naturally to someone who spent their days networking with high-net-worth clients. I stayed near the edge of the group, still holding my serving tray, still invisible. Just the way I liked it. "And this," Catherine said, her voice dropping slightly as she reached me, "is my sister Rebecca. She helps out tonight." David glanced at me with polite disinterest, the kind of look you give to staff at a party. "Nice to meet you." "Mr. Thompson," I replied with a small nod. "Rebecca's been keeping us all taken care of," Catherine continued, her tone bright, but with an edge underneath. "She's very good at serving. It's what she does." The words hit their target perfectly. David's attention had already moved on, Catherine's point was made, and I was firmly established in my role as the family disappointment. "Now," Catherine said, linking her arm through David's, "let me tell you about some of the exciting cases I'm working on." As they moved away, I caught fragments of their conversation. Catherine was animated, impressive even, discussing legal strategies and client relationships. She was genuinely good at her job, I had to admit. Smart, articulate, driven. If only she knew who was really signing her paychecks. I continued moving through the party, collecting glasses and plates, listening to conversations, watching the social dynamics play out like a complex dance. Catherine was the star of the evening, and she knew it. She told stories about court victories, name-dropped important clients, painted a picture of success and ambition that impressed everyone present. "You must be so proud," someone said to my parents. "Oh, we are," my mother replied. "Catherine has always been destined for great things." No one asked about me. No one wondered about my life, my work, my achievements. I was background noise, a footnote in the story of Catherine's success, which was exactly how I'd planned it. "Rebecca!" Catherine's voice cut through my thoughts. She was standing near the center of the room now, David at her side, all eyes on her. "Could you bring Mr. Thompson another scotch? The Macallan 25, not the regular stuff." I nodded and moved toward the bar cart, aware that I was now part of Catherine's performance. She was demonstrating her power, her status, her ability to command even her own family. "You're very lucky to have such helpful family," David said to Catherine, his tone suggesting he was making conversation more than paying a compliment. "Oh, Rebecca's always been the helpful type," Catherine replied. "Never had much ambition beyond, well, this, but she's reliable." I poured the scotch carefully, the expensive whiskey catching the light like liquid gold. As I approached David with the glass, Catherine continued her commentary. "Some people are born to lead," she said, accepting a fresh wine glass from another guest. "Others are born to serve. It's just the natural order of things." David accepted his drink with a distracted nod, his attention focused on something Catherine was explaining about a recent merger her firm had handled. I stepped back into the shadows, watching the interplay between them, noting the way Catherine deferred to David's expertise while simultaneously showcasing her own knowledge. She really was good at this. The networking, the relationship building, the careful balance of confidence and respect. Under different circumstances, I might have been impressed. "The key to success in our business," David was saying, "is understanding power dynamics. Knowing who has real influence, who makes the actual decisions. Too many young lawyers get distracted by flashy presentations and miss the real power brokers." Catherine nodded eagerly. "That's exactly what I've learned working with you. It's not always obvious who's really in charge." "Precisely," David agreed. "Sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones you'd least expect." I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth as I collected another tray of empty glasses. If David only knew how right he was. The party continued around me, conversations flowing like wine, laughter mixing with the soft jazz playing in the background. I moved through it all like a ghost, present but unnoticed, serving and cleaning and maintaining the perfect backdrop for Catherine's moment of triumph. "You know," Catherine said, her voice carrying more wine-induced confidence than wisdom, "I sometimes feel bad for people who don't have ambition, like Rebecca. She's perfectly content being ordinary." She gestured toward me with her wine glass, and I felt the attention of the room shift briefly in my direction before sliding away again. "Not everyone can be extraordinary," David replied diplomatically. "Exactly!" Catherine's voice rose slightly. "Some people are meant for greatness, and others are meant to serve the ones who achieve greatness." The room had grown quieter now, the conversation taking on an edge that made people uncomfortable. I could see my parents exchanging glances, uncertain whether to intervene. "Catherine," my father said gently, "perhaps—" "No, it's important to acknowledge these things," Catherine interrupted. "Success isn't an accident. It comes from hard work, intelligence, the right breeding. Some people have it, others don't." She looked directly at me as she said this, her meaning crystal clear to everyone in the room. "Rebecca's fine with her life," Catherine continued. "Aren't you, Rebecca? Happy with your little waitressing job, content to serve others while people like me make the real decisions?" The question hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Everyone was looking at me now, waiting for my response. Catherine stood there with her wine glass raised slightly, David at her side, the entire party watching this moment unfold. I set down my serving tray carefully on the nearest table. The small sound seemed amplified in the sudden quiet. "You know what, Catherine?" I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room. "You're absolutely right about one thing." I paused, meeting her eyes directly for the first time all evening. Some people are meant for greatness, and others are meant to serve. Catherine smiled triumphantly, thinking she'd won. "The question is," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "which one of us is which?" Before Catherine could respond, David Thompson's scotch glass slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound like breaking illusions. The silence that followed was deafening. David stared at me with an expression I'd seen many times before, the moment when recognition dawns, when the impossible becomes undeniable, when the world rearranges itself in a single heartbeat. "Wait," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Wait just a minute." Catherine looked between us, confusion replacing her triumphant smile. "Mr. Thompson? Is everything all right?" David took a step closer to me, studying my face with the intensity of a man trying to solve a puzzle that defied logic. The room held its breath, sensing something momentous happening but not understanding what. "Rebecca Williams," he said slowly, as if testing the words. "Yes," I replied simply. "Rebecca Williams," he repeated, and now his voice carried the weight of dawning comprehension. Oh my God, you're—" "David," I said gently, "perhaps we should—" "You're the CEO!" The words exploded from him with such force that several people jumped. "You're Rebecca Williams, the founder and CEO of Williams Enterprise Group." The reaction was immediate and devastating. Catherine's wine glass followed David's scotch to the floor, red wine spreading across the white marble like spilled blood. My mother's hand flew to her throat. My father's face went completely pale. "That's impossible," Catherine whispered. David was shaking his head, laughing now with the kind of hysteria that comes from having your entire understanding of reality overturned. "Henderson and Associates is a subsidiary of Williams Enterprise Group. Rebecca Williams is our parent company's CEO. She's—" He stopped, looking around the room at the stunned faces. "She's my boss. She's everyone's boss." I reached down and carefully removed the small serving apron I'd been wearing, folding it neatly and setting it on the nearest table. The simple gesture somehow carried more weight than any dramatic revelation could have. "Hello, David," I said in the voice I used for board meetings, calm, authoritative, unmistakably in command. "I hope you've been enjoying the party." Catherine's legs seemed to give out, and she sank into the nearest chair. "This isn't possible. This isn't possible. You're a waitress. You work at Miller's Diner." "I own Miller's Diner," I corrected gently, "along with about 47 other businesses in the hospitality sector. It's part of my portfolio diversification strategy." The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, questions flew. People tried to process what they'd just heard. But I kept my eyes on Catherine, watching as the full implications began to sink in. "You work for me," I continued, my voice cutting through the noise. "Henderson and Associates became a Williams Enterprise subsidiary 3 years ago. I've been your ultimate employer for longer than you've been getting promoted." David was nodding frantically now, pieces clicking into place. "The anonymous benefactor who funded the firm's expansion. The mysterious investor who never attended board meetings but approved every major decision. That was you." "That was me," I confirmed. My father found his voice first. "Rebecca, what is this? What's going on?" I turned to address the room, and something in my posture must have commanded attention because the chaos gradually subsided into stunned silence. "What's going on," I said clearly, "is that I've spent the last 10 years building a business empire while letting you all believe I was a failure. What's going on is that I've been financially supporting this family for years while watching you treat me like I was worth nothing." I gestured around the room at the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, at the artwork and the imported furnishings. "This house? I bought it. The mortgage payments, the property taxes, the maintenance costs. All of it comes from Williams Enterprise Group accounts. I've been paying for your lifestyle while you've been embarrassed by my existence." My mother's face had gone white. "Rebecca, that's not— we never— You never what, Mom? Never made it clear that Catherine was the success story and I was the disappointment? Never failed to ask about my life, my work, my achievements? Never bothered to wonder how I could afford to help with Dad's medical bills 2 years ago?" The room was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in abandoned drinks. "Catherine's promotion at Henderson and Associates," I continued. "I recommended her for that position. I thought working at a firm within my corporate family might give her opportunities she wouldn't have elsewhere. I believed in her potential." Catherine looked like she was going to be sick. "You're lying. This is some kind of joke. Some kind of elaborate—" "David," I said, still looking at my sister, "would you please show Catherine the organizational chart on your phone? The one that shows who signs your paychecks?" With shaking hands, David pulled out his device and navigated to what was clearly a familiar document. He held it out to Catherine, whose face went from denial to horror as she stared at the screen. "Williams Enterprise Group," she read in a hollow voice. "Parent company, Henderson and Associates, Chief Executive Officer." She looked up at me with something approaching terror. "Rebecca A. Williams." I walked to the mantelpiece where family photos were displayed. Catherine's graduation, Catherine's first job, Catherine at various celebrations. Notably absent were any photos of my achievements, my successes, my milestones. I picked up Catherine's law school graduation photo. "I was so proud when you graduated," I said softly. "I wanted to be there, but you said it was for important family only. So I watched the live stream from my office and had flowers delivered anonymously." I set the photo down and turned back to the room. "I've been watching from the sidelines for years, hoping that someday you might see me as something more than a disappointment. Hoping that the success I'd built might matter to you if you knew about it." "Why didn't you tell us?" my father asked, his voice strained. "Because I wanted to see who you really were," I replied. "I wanted to know if you loved me for myself, or just for what I could provide." Tonight, I got my answer. Catherine stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This changes everything. I didn't know. If I had known—" "If you had known, you would have treated me differently," I finished. "But not because you respected me more, because you would have wanted something from me." The truth of that statement hung in the air like a physical presence. "The question now," I continued, "is what happens next?" I pulled out my phone. Not the simple device I'd been carrying tonight, but the high-end smartphone that connected me to a business empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "David, I think we need to have a conversation about Catherine's employment status." "Ms. Williams, please," David said quickly. "If this is about what happened tonight—" "This is about what happens every night," I interrupted. "This is about character, about how someone treats people they believe are beneath them, about whether Henderson and Associates wants to employ someone who thinks service workers exist for her amusement." Catherine's face went from pale to gray. "Rebecca, you can't. This is my career. This is everything I've worked for." "Is it?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like everything you have has been built on a foundation I provided. The house you live in, the connections that got you the job, the recommendations that led to your promotions. All of it traces back to me." I scrolled through my phone, pulling up a document. "Your student loans from law school, paid off by an anonymous benefactor. Your car payments, subsidized through a shell company. The down payment for your apartment, a gift from a trust you never bothered to investigate." With each revelation, Catherine seemed to shrink further into herself. "I've been your safety net for years, Catherine. Your silent partner, your invisible support system. And tonight, you used me as entertainment for your boss." "I'm sorry," Catherine whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "You didn't know because you never asked. You never wondered. You never saw me as anything more than your inferior." I looked around the room at the faces of family and friends, all struggling to process this reversal of everything they thought they knew. "But here's what you really don't understand," I continued. "This isn't about revenge. This is about consequences. Natural, inevitable consequences for choices that were made freely." I turned to address David directly. Catherine will need to find new employment. Henderson and Associates will provide appropriate references reflecting her technical competence, but I can't have someone in my organization who treats people the way she treated me tonight. Rebecca, please, Catherine said, standing up. I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll change. Just don't. Don't what? Don't hold you accountable for your actions. Don't expect you to face the results of your choices. I walked over to where she stood, close enough that only she could hear my next words. For 10 years, I've been giving you opportunities to show me that underneath all this arrogance and cruelty, there was still the little sister I used to love. Tonight was your final exam, Catherine, and you failed. When I stepped back, tears were streaming down her face. This house, I announced to the room, will be going on the market next month. The family trust that's been covering the expenses will be dissolved. Everyone currently living here will need to make alternate arrangements. My parents exchanged looks of panic. The cars, the country club membership, the credit cards connected to Williams' enterprise accounts, all of it ends tomorrow morning. Rebecca, my mother said, her voice breaking, you can't mean this. We're family. Are we? I asked. Because family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Family doesn't stand by while one member humiliates another for sport. I looked around the room one final time, at the faces of people who had written me off, dismissed me, used me as a punchline for their entertainment. I built an empire while you believed I was nothing. I became someone worth respecting while you decided I was worth nothing. The tragedy isn't that I succeeded without you knowing. The tragedy is that you made it clear my success wouldn't have mattered to you anyway. David cleared his throat carefully. Ms. Williams, if I may, the way Catherine behaved tonight was inexcusable. I had no idea she was treating family this way. You didn't know because people like Catherine are very good at managing up while abusing down, I replied. It's a common pattern in toxic personalities. I began moving toward the door, and the crowd parted before me like water. Where are you going? My father asked. Home, I said simply. To the penthouse I bought 5 years ago. The one none of you knew about because none of you ever asked where I lived. Catherine made a desperate sound. Rebecca, wait. Please. Can't we talk about this? Can't we work something out? I paused at the threshold and looked back at her. For just a moment, I saw the little girl who used to follow me around, who used to think I hung the moon, who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. We could have worked something out any time in the last 10 years, I said quietly. All you had to do was treat me like I mattered. All you had to do was love me for who I was instead of judging me for who you thought I wasn't. I pulled my car keys from my purse. Keys to a car none of them had seen because I'd been careful to park it down the street. The funny thing is, Catherine, I would have given you the world if you'd just treated me like your sister instead of your servant. As I walked away from the house, my house, the house I'd been paying for while they treated me like hired help, I could hear the eruption of voices behind me, panic, recriminations, desperate planning, the sound of a world collapsing. My phone buzzed with the first of what would be many messages. I glanced at it briefly. Catherine begging, pleading, promising to change. But some things, once broken, can't be repaired. Some words, once spoken, can't be taken back. Some choices, once made, can't be undone. I'd given them every opportunity to see me, to value me, to love me. Instead, they'd chosen to diminish me, to use me, to make me the butt of their jokes. Now they would learn what life looked like without the safety net they never knew they had. I slipped into my car, a modest sedan, nothing flashy, nothing that would have drawn attention at family gatherings, and drove away from the house that had never really been a home. Behind me, through the rearview mirror, I could see lights blazing in every window as my family faced the reality of who they really were and who I had always been. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be lawyers and accountants and financial advisors helping them adjust to their new reality. There would be job searches and apartment hunting and the difficult process of learning to live within their actual means. But tonight, for the first time in years, I was driving toward a future where I wouldn't have to pretend to be less than I was, where I wouldn't have to hide my success or apologize for my achievements. Tonight, I was finally free to be exactly who I had always been: Rebecca Williams, CEO, entrepreneur, and finally, permanently, no one's disappointment but their own.